Every Tuesday, we are here to talk to you about nutrition and lifestyle issues that affect our community. The purpose of these sessions are to educate, to inspire, and to motivate us as a community so that we can make healthier lifestyle choices that will eventually prevent chronic diseases, but also help us manage those ones that we are living with. Today, we have our dietitian, Alistair Kumi, who is a diabetes dietitian, but he's not going to talk to us about diabetes today. He'll do that another time. We're going to talk about a very important topic, cholesterol. And I do know that there's a lot of misinformation on the internet. And so I'm really looking forward to today's talk. Feel free to ask your questions, put your questions in the chat box. If you're on Facebook, YouTube, just drop your questions and we will answer these questions for you. So Alistair, if you are ready, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hiba. Thank you, Shekinah. Thank you, Elizabeth. My name is Alistair. I'm a diabetes specialist dietitian. So today, you all get to be a part of my clinic. So I'm still sitting in the clinic room, doing this talk today and sharing the slides with you all. I guess because it's kind of early, I just wanted to sort of see who's on the chat at the moment, and sort of identify any things that they may have heard about sort of cholesterol or fats in the diet, with especially with regards to the African or Caribbean diet. What sort of things have you heard already? I'm interested to know before we do the talk. So just walking through. So Claire's A22 says she can't hear the sound. I have an F Walker. Maybe if they could be unmuted.
Or if they don't want to speak, they can always put it in the chat box. Some people.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I guess with regards to cholesterol and diet, this is a topic that's actually really sort of close to my heart. It's one of my favorite topics to speak about. It's a real love and interest area. Just because as a diabetes dietitian, if I was to give you some background, we spend so much time, as you can imagine with diabetes, sort of speaking about sort of blood sugars and things like that. But as you know, when it comes to sort of diabetes as a whole, we're actually taking a look at the organs that are affected by diabetes ultimately. And in terms of those sort of organs that are affected by diabetes, we're thinking about the heart, the brain, the kidneys, and cholesterol actually plays right into that mix. So cholesterol and blood pressure play into that mix. But today I'm going to be focusing specifically on cholesterol. And I guess one of the greatest things about today is the fact that we get to do it from an African and Caribbean lens, taking a look at our foods specifically, being able to bust any myths, about how much cholesterol is in our foods, whether our foods raise cholesterol, whether our foods drop cholesterol. I'm sure that people are really excited or keen to find out exactly what sort of impact our diet has on cholesterol. So I'm looking forward to speaking about that with you today. But I guess before I started, were there any imminent questions? But before I shared slides, things that people may have been burning on your chest, and you just wanted to bring it to the forefront. Feel free to use the chat function as Hiba and Elizabeth were saying. Okay. And I can see that the people are still entering as well. So I was actually going to ask Hiba, Elizabeth, should I share the slide straight away?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I was just trying to do a feeler to see if there were any burning questions that people had, because usually you'll have a few things in the crowd. So I'm going to share slides that I'm going to speak on today. Okay. Yep, can everyone see those okay?
Yes, yes.
Very good, all good. Okay, so yeah, as I was saying, today's topic is cholesterol and diet, and we're looking at it from an African and Caribbean food focus. I'm presenting to you today. I'm Alistair Kumi, diabetes specialist dietitian, based within London. So I currently live in Reading. I qualified as a dietitian in 2017, specialized in diabetes in 2019. And during my tenure, an acute dietitian after qualifying, I gained experience in, clinical nutrition, obesity nutrition, diabetes nutrition, renal disease, and I was taking a look at clinical nutrition support for trauma and orthopedics in the healthcare of the elderly. So I've had a really sort of broad look into, how nutrition and diabetes can affect people of different ages and different backgrounds. And at the moment, I'm following my passion area, working as a diabetes specialist dietitian. So I'm focused on one particular area, and I do that in the NHS. And I also work in private practice and do freelance work also. So why am I speaking about cholesterol today? So, as you heard me rambling on earlier, I do have, there are sort of a lot of things when it comes to sort of cholesterol and and dietary management. But my top three reasons for speaking about it today are just to raise awareness of what raised cholesterol is, and to raise awareness of raised cholesterol being a strong contributing factor in the development of strokes, heart attacks, and general cardiovascular disease, which all manifest silently. So I'm not sure how many of you are on Instagram, but a post was put up by CAHN, sort of earlier in the week, where they were speaking, about how having a raised cholesterol is something that goes without symptoms. You wouldn't even know. So it's really, really important to sort of be aware of what that might look like for you. So my second reason is that Africans and Caribbeans are more likely to experience exposure to some of the modifiable risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So we'll be looking at diet as one of these risk factors. When we speak about modifiable risk factors, we're speaking about things that you have active control over. So I could go into a lot of things today, but diet is the main thing that we're going to be looking at. And then later on in the exercise session, I know that Orlando is going to be going through exercise for you, which is a really, really, really good way of actually managing cholesterol, managing weight, managing blood pressure, and managing, health in general. And then, lastly, we're going to have a chance to, look at cultural norms. I'm going to look at cooking practices, and we're going to think about whether our methods promote or lower cholesterol, whether they improve or whether they harm health. So, we'll be having a nice forensic look at that as well. And I think it's just good to just have that sort of dialogue. So, with regards to culture, we know that, there are certain, food is a huge part of cultural identity, a huge part of cultural history. There are some things that we have been doing for years, just because it's been passed down from generation to generation. It's one story told to another generation, so that they can continue, sort of that lineage, that history, that culture. And, sometimes, some of those things that are passed down may not be as helpful to the next generation. So we're going to look at, how helpful some of those practices are. All right. So what is cholesterol? Sort of starting off, cholesterol is made from the fats in your diet, and it is a special kind of fat molecule. You have two types of cholesterol. So you've got the low density lipoprotein, or LDL, which is tokened as the bad cholesterol, and we've got the HDL, which is the good cholesterol, which is the high density lipoprotein. And we know that high LDL levels are linked to coronary artery disease and stroke. So what does that mean for you? So, when you get a blood test done, at your GP or, or in the hospital, sometimes you'll get a reading and, of what your cholesterol is doing. So this is just giving context to what those figures actually are. So looking out for looking out for LDL, looking out for HDL, and understanding what they're doing for you. So the reason I've put this picture sort of below is because I like to think of LDL as I call LDL sort of lazy Larry because it's a storage form of cholesterol. So it's not inherently bad, but when you feed into it, what happens is you get a lot of storage of cholesterol, sort of in the artery walls. And if anything happens to those artery walls, all of that LDL cholesterol can leak out, and it can lead to blockages and coronary artery disease and things like that. And then I call this guy sort of Happy Harry. So he's the HDL cholesterol, and he's the moving form of cholesterol. So what he's doing is he's picking up after Larry, making sure that extra cholesterol in your bloodstream goes towards your liver, gets processed, moves into your poop and is excreted from your body. So it's good to have, sort of nice high levels of Harry and low levels of Larry. So the targets with cholesterol are on your overall blood report for the year. You're aiming to have a total cholesterol of less than 5 on your blood test. So the LDL level should be less than 3 and the HDL level should be more than 1. These two figures won't add up to make a perfect total cholesterol level because there are other things involved. But your main focus is just making sure that that LDL's got to be less than 3, HDL's got to be more than 1. And if it's not, what can I do about it? So if it is higher than the target, so if your total cholesterol is more than 5, you may need to make some dietary and lifestyle changes. And your GP or healthcare professional will suggest that you take a statin to help maintain those really good levels of cholesterol. As all of that is happening, some useful dietary changes you can make off the bat are, one, increasing, and including, 2 portions of oily fish in your diet a week. So we're looking at 140 grams per portion. So we're going to look at what 140 grams looks like later on in the slides. Increasing your whole grain fiber intake. So sometimes adding things like flax seeds to porridge or Weetabix can increase, the omega-3 fatty acids. So we're actually going to be speaking about that later as well. Aiming for 2 meat-free days a week. So trying to get, sort of total meat out of the diet and having some more sort of plant-based days in your diet to help to actively lower cholesterol. So we're going to be speaking about why, sort of meat can feed into, raised levels of cholesterol, especially raised levels of LDL. And we're going to be looking at cooking where possible to control how much and what fats you use. So, coming from, from an African and Caribbean background, I know that once again, our food is a huge part of our cultural identity. So a lot of people are cooking, but for those who aren't and are enjoying the foods of others, it's all about thinking about ways that you can cook where possible to control how much and what fats you use. Because when you're eating someone else's food, you don't quite know what sort of combinations that they've put together. And then lastly, we're looking at sort of adding more green leafy vegetables, to meals. So for example, seasoned spinach on the side of some of the meals that you do eat. All right. So how does diet get into the picture? So our bodies basically make all the cholesterol it needs from fats in our diet, and it absorbs really, really, really small amounts of cholesterol from certain foods, such as eggs, meat, and full fat dairy products. And we know, through the evidence that a diet that's high in saturated fats and alcohol actively contributes to increased LDL cholesterol. So we're looking at things like red meat and, sort of land animal fats. Whereas diets that are higher in healthier unsaturated fats can actively reduce those sort of, bad or storage form cholesterol levels. And they can contribute to actually higher HDL levels. So foods that are in this sort of group are things like oily fish, so sardines, mackerel. I can see that I've actually written sardines twice. That was not intentional, and salmon as well. So foods like that, are really, really, really good at actually keeping cholesterol levels steady, just because of the special sort of chemical or special fatty acid that's found in them. Anyone in the crowd know what that sort of special fat found in oily fish is called? Feel free to chuck it into the chat or yell it out if that's what you want to do.
Omega H3.
Oh yeah, who said that? Who said that?
Oh, it's Kiki.
Oh, thank you very much, Kiki. Thank you very much. So yes, you are right. It is omega-3 fats. So you would have heard a lot about them in media, a lot about them in adverts. A lot of food manufacturers, have seen the evidence and are now trying to chuck it into their foods to make sure that we can get more omega-3 in our diets. So interestingly, both African and Caribbean diets can be quite high in omega-3 fatty acids, but living in the West, especially in the UK, access to omega-3 containing foods can be quite limited, because the general culture or general atmosphere isn't really an omega-3 sort of promoting environment. So we don't live by a beautiful sea coast in the Mediterranean where we have access to fresh sardines or fresh salmon coming out of streams and things like that. So the next point about sort of how diet gets into the picture is that overall you're aiming for a diet that's lower in saturated fat and controlled amounts of unsaturated fat, so that you can reduce levels of bad cholesterol and reduce your risk of future cardiovascular events. So we always speak about cardiovascular events as something that's only hitting, sort of men or women in their late 50s who maybe carry quite a bit of weight around their abdomen. But in some cases, we're seeing people with really, really raised cholesterols, high blood pressures, who actively have cardiovascular disease within their 30s because of eating habits that they had from their teens into their 20s, and it's really affected what's going on in their 30s now. So people are getting affected younger and younger and younger. So it's all about sort of building that awareness. So we move. Quick sort of question. Obviously, do cholesterol lowering products work? So we know that there are loads of them on the market, and the short answer is it depends. So the reason it depends is because with these particular products, they contain these plant oils called stanols or sterols that actively block the absorption of cholesterol in the body. So these things occur naturally, and they're absolutely brilliant. And some examples of these products include fortified milks and yogurts, things like the Flora proactive spread or the Benecol drinks. So I'll sort of take you back to the slide before. So you see you've got your Flora proactive spread. Sort of show of hands, who's sort of seen these kinds of products on the market, who's tried these products before. What did you think of them?
Can I come in terms of taste, or what do you mean? On all fronts. So sort of like taste, ease of getting in the diet, price, okay, yes. So a lot of these things I think are more expensive. Once they have this label on, they tend to be a bit more expensive than the other products. But in terms of taste, I think it's pretty much the same like the other ones.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. So like sort of food manufacturing, and food scientists are so amazing and adept at what they do that they've been able to blend a lot of these products so that they really can come out to market and really can compete with the things that we're used to. So like the butters, the margarines, you know, and the other sort of yogurt drinks that are out there. But, you know, as you said, Hiba, you know, these products do tend to be a little bit more pricey just because of the added bits to them. So if I was to go back to the next slide. So the reason why I said it depends in terms of do these products actually work is that you would need 1 to 3 servings, so like a 2-gram dose every day over a 3 to 6 month period for some kind of therapeutic effect. And obviously that therapeutic effect is pretty profound, because if your LDL cholesterol, you know, was about 3.3, so if I was to take you back to this slide, it's just gone over the target. In 3 to 6 months, one of these products could actually bring your LDL down to a nice, steady, safe place. So you could get that 10 to 15% reduction. So it could bring it to target over a 3 to 6 month period, you know, which is pretty cool. The caveat though is that if you are on a statin medication, statins now work or have been working so powerfully that the effects of these products actually become more or less useless in lowering cholesterol. So if you're on a statin at the same time and you're trying to take these products to lower cholesterol, these products end up becoming a waste of money because you lose the therapeutic boost of them. So you're better off just going back to the spreads that you're used to and just controlling the amounts of them that you have. All right. So like the next sort of question I usually get when it comes to cholesterol is, do fish oil or omega-3 tablets work? And you know, I was having a debate with my missus about this. So she's also a diabetes dietitian, and you know, I was throwing out some evidence saying that maybe they don't work. She was bringing some evidence saying that maybe they do work. So we took a look at, like, you know, at one of the most sort of robust evidence sources. So it's the sort of Cochrane library that takes a look at systematic reviews of over, you know, hundreds of thousands of people who have been on these tablets for specific therapeutic effects. And we've actually seen that the omega-3 supplements can actually be good if your diet and lifestyle have other existing cholesterol lowering factors. So obviously I've put these products on there, so I'm not advertising for them or anything. I'm just giving some examples of some stuff that's on the market right now. And I've put some very friendly fish on this side as well, just highlighting the fact that, you know, when it comes to supplements, they are ultimately supplementary, you know, and all they're doing is they're supplementing things that are already in your diet. So if you're not getting enough sort of omega-3, you know, sort of week by week, you know, sometimes these supplements can come in and can help to boost those cholesterol lowering effects and the promotion of good cholesterol in your blood. So actually, before I move on to fat types, were there any questions that you guys had about like cholesterol lowering products that maybe you tried? Anyone maybe who's been on a statin before? Anyone who's against statins and those kinds of medications?
Can I ask a quick question myself?
Yeah, sure.
Alistair, from your experience, clinical experience, have you had patients with high cholesterol levels that you were able to manage just with their diet and lifestyle without the statin? Do you have any experience like that you can share, or do they have to be on the statin?
Oh, so yes, actually. So this was sort of back in my weight management time, and you know, there was an individual who was completely against statins and actually had some side effects to some of the statins that they had, and I think because of the kind of diet that they had at the time, there was sort of a lot of judgment from health professionals. So, you know, the person carried quite a bit of weight, you know, around their abdomen. So there was that sort of pre-clinical bias about, you know, maybe their lifestyle, the fact that they're not getting enough exercise, all that sort of stuff. So that person felt stigmatized and really just was adamant that they wanted to do it through diet. So, one of the things that we did was we just took a look at what this person was doing, was doing day by day, and then taking a look at their whole week. And, we discovered that in the week, that person was, eating sort of takeaway foods, and the thing is, it was sort of like, it was African takeaway foods that they were having, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And obviously, these are foods that this person isn't cooking themselves, so they don't quite know what fats are going into the food. And also, it's takeaway, so there's got to be really, really handsome portions of the food too. So, in terms of being able to portion control it, that was also an issue. So the 3 areas that that we addressed was, 1, sort of taking a look at portion control, 2, taking a look at how often they're having takeaway foods and how often they're cooking at home. So trying to limit those takeaway foods to maybe once a fortnight. So this was specific for that particular person. And then, sort of 3, actively getting this person to, sort of work on their physical activity. So it wasn't even going to the gym. It was essentially going for, a 30-minute walk, sort of 2 or 3 times a week, and then doing some resistance exercise at home, with resistance bands and some chair-based exercise. And, within sort of 3 months, this person was able to notice a change in their cholesterol. So there was a reduction in their LDL cholesterol. And, the most helpful sort of outcome of that, sort of clinically and anecdotally, was just the fact that this person just put 3 solid lifestyle changes in place at the same time for that optimized benefit. And then they were also they started having a breakfast. They weren't having breakfast before, but they started having breakfast and having some porridge oats, at the start of the day, to help with optimizing that cholesterol lowering.
Yeah. Thanks.
No problems. So when looking at sort of fat types, we know that fats occur in sort of two forms. You've got your saturated fats and you've got your unsaturated fats. It gets quite tricky in the Caribbean and African diet, though, because we have, and well, actually, I'll explain it further. It's actually explained on the next slide, so I'll keep on going. So we know that, as a rule of thumb, saturated fats are mostly solid at room temperature. But the thing is, you can get some very viscous liquid forms of saturated fat. And then we have unsaturated fats as well, which are mostly in a smooth liquid form. But you can get some that have a more solid structure too. So it's important to think about that in terms of heart and blood vessel health as well, because obviously, if you've got something that, for example, you're frying bacon, and you're sort of leaving the fat in the pan, after maybe 30 minutes, an hour, you notice that it's really sort of solid. It's formed this sort of solid wax, sort of in the pan. If you think about that in terms of your heart, you think about that in terms of your blood vessel health, obviously you're thinking about all of this saturated fat sort of sitting in your body and sitting in your blood vessels and clogging things up and slowing things down. So you're probably thinking, okay, that's something that I might want to try and limit. So as a rule of thumb, all land animal fats contain saturated fat. So that includes milk, red meats, chicken, and all oily fish contain unsaturated fats. So once again, we've got our friend the sardine, we've got mackerel, pilchards. Interestingly, fresh tuna, so freshly caught tuna and freshly cut tuna contains those omega-3 fatty acids, but canned tuna doesn't, because it's all lost in the processing. But all the same, it's still useful to have canned tuna in the diet if that's something that you like. The omega-3 won't all be there, but it still is a really, really, really healthy protein, and sort of low fat protein to have too in the diet. I can see someone dropped a question. Was it Clee, about patients with diabetes having a lower range for total cholesterol? Yeah, So that is a good question, and yes, there is a lower range for total cholesterol. So people with diabetes will, are aiming for a total cholesterol of less than 4, and that's because they already have that really, really, really high cardiovascular risk just by having diabetes on its own. So to really safeguard, people with diabetes from having heart attacks and strokes, we give them a much stricter cholesterol target. So I hope that answers the question for you, Clay. Okay, so move on to the next one. So yeah, saturated fat, is it a friend? Is it our foe? So, as we know, diets that are really high in saturated fat, especially from animal sources, will contribute to a higher LDL level. And I've sort of noted some common saturated fats in African and Caribbean diets. So I want you all to notice how there actually aren't too many. So I was really going through like the evidence base, going through all the literature sources, going through my mum's recipes, going through my friend's mother's recipes, and these were sort of the common bases. But you can let me know if I may have missed out any actually. So there's quite an overlap with African and Caribbean cooking, but I know that, or I can see that one of the main sort of saturated fat sources in the African diet would be palm oil. So what makes palm oil interesting is the fact that, when it's sort of sitting there in its little container, it has a liquid viscous structure, doesn't it? So you would think that it's like an unsaturated fat, but its actual structure is the saturated kind. So really high amounts of palm oil in your diet will contribute to a higher LDL level, which can contribute towards developing heart disease at some stage in the future. So just being aware of that. So definitely not to demonize palm oil, because palm oil also does have other amazing health benefits. So palm oil can be used as an anti-inflammatory in some cases. It's great for skin health, but it has to be had at sort of small. It has to be had in small quantities in order to really experience those benefits within a nice varied diet, where there is plant protein, where there is some animal protein, or if you're vegetarian or vegan, sort of going for those plant protein sources. In the Caribbean diet, one of the main sort of saturated fats that I came across in the papers was actually coconut cream. So interestingly, it's something that you might find in a really beautiful Guinness punch, and some other cooking as well. So once again, sort of coconut oil, it follows a sort of saturated structure. So it, once again, has plenty of health benefits. We're seeing some clinical trials for being able to help people with Alzheimer's dementia and helping people who have had multiple sclerosis. But too much of a good thing can contribute to higher LDL levels. So just being aware of that. And with the crossovers, we've got sort of condensed milk, sort of as a saturated fat. So I don't know whether anyone's like maybe had like cornmeal porridge, sort of in the morning. And garnishing it with condensed milk for that sort of that sweetness, that flavor, that taste. It does contain quite a bit of saturated fat, so being aware of that. As we know, butter is a common one. Coconut oil is another sort of common one. Whole milk, interestingly, obviously it's got that whole structure, that creamy structure, and that's all coming from the fat in the milk. And then we've got meat stock as well. So meat stock from lamb, beef, sort of duck, all the sort of land meats. Like when you cook them, having that sort of dripping left over and using it for gravies and things like that, will be adding extra saturated fat to the foods. So saturated fat has a really, really sort of lovely flavor and taste profile. But once again, it's just a matter of just being easy with it, and making sure that there isn't a great deal of it in your diet. So if you're having meat stock as part of your everyday sort of diet, you know, just being aware that it can have ramifications for your blood cholesterol levels. So maybe thinking about some of the unsaturated fat sources to give you a hand. So any questions that came from that at all?
Not that I can see, no.
Okay. So next we're looking at sort of like spreads and labels. So I've put up two sort of common, you know, sort of fat spreads. So I've got my Flora Proactive. So remember that omega-3 sort of Flora Proactive spread, and I've got my Clover spread here. And I've basically got the two labels. So it can be so confusing actually. Going into the supermarket, people have told you, try and go for unsaturated fat. You're taking a look at both of these labels and it's not quite clear, okay, how do I tell whether this is an unsaturated fat or saturated fat? You know, what makes it clear? So basically with the labels, I've sort of highlighted the fat section here in sort of the blue boxes. So this is basically telling you how much fat is in 100 grams of a particular food. So in other words, when you see that per 100 grams, you're thinking percent. So obviously per 100%. So as you can see, Flora Proactive is 35% fat. But what percentage of that fat is saturated fat and what percentage of that fat is unsaturated? So as you can see, you've got 7.6 grams of saturated fat in a Flora Proactive spread, but you've got you've got your monounsaturated fatty acids there, and you've got polyunsaturated fatty acids. So that adds up to about 27. So there's 27 grams of unsaturated fat and 7 grams of saturated fat. So is this Flora Proactive more of an unsaturated fatty spread, or is it a saturated fat spread? I'll leave it up to you guys to decide. Answers in the chat.
And it's not a big group. Feel free to go.
All right, so I'll take it on. So as you can see, you know, this Flora Proactive spread, there's 27 grams of 35 grams that are unsaturated fat. So when you see the monounsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated, that's all unsaturated fat. So this fat spread is an unsaturated fatty spread. You know, it leans more towards that side. But then we've got our Clover on this side. You know, so Clover is, you know, 64.5% fat. So there's 64.5 grams in every 100 grams of Clover of fat. 22 grams of that is, you know, pure fat, pure saturated fat. And then you've got monounsaturated of 28 grams and polyunsaturated of about almost 12 grams. So, you know, you're getting about 40 grams of unsaturated fat in there as well. So Clover lies towards that unsaturated fat side. So hopefully that helps you guys, you know, being able to, you know, go into the supermarkets and just feeling more confident picking, you know, a spread that has a little bit more of that unsaturated fat blend. Because ultimately, when it comes to fat, you're thinking about the frequency that you're having it, the amount of it that you're having, and the type that you're having. And obviously, as you can see here, if you're going for a typing that's more in that unsaturated range, it, you know, there's less ramifications for heart and cholesterol levels. So as a little sort of tip here, I've put that in order to know whether something is high in saturated fat, you know, once it's got more than 5 grams of saturates per 100 grams, then you know that, okay, this guy is actually quite high in saturated fat. So this Clover, even though it does contain quite a high portion of you know, sort of unsaturated fats, it is quite high in saturated fat still, but that's because it's a fat spread. So you know, so you would expect it to. So if you saw this label in the supermarket, it would be red on the traffic light system. In fact, the Flora Proactive will also come up as red on the traffic light system because it contains 7.6 grams per every 100 grams of fat. So, you know, once again, it is based off a saturated fat structure, but it does have some unsaturated fats in there to make it more, let's just say, heart or fat friendly. I'll move on to the next one. So this will be a good one for everyone. So we're taking a look at sort of common foods and their saturated fat comparison. So we're starting with Africa on this side. So I really have to do a shout out to Tanifa Apeke. So she's a doctor and researcher in Leeds. So her and a team got together and they basically took a look at some of the common foods from both the African sort of diaspora and the Caribbean diaspora, just some really sort of common name drop foods. And they took a look at loads of things, the nutritional composition. The disclaimer I must, oh, I've got a raised hand from Helena.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, thank you. I have a question from the previous slide.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just a bit confused about your choice of, or your preference for anyone who goes to the supermarket to get either of these breads. Because I was thinking that, okay, we're looking at 100 grams and we see that Clover is high for saturated fats compared to Flora. So I would have gone for Flora, but I think I'm getting that you would recommend Clover. Oh, am I wrong?
No. So what I've done is I've put both of those on there just as an example of how to read the label. So there's no real preference for me. In fact, out of the two of these, I can see that actually Flora Proactive is the lower in overall fat and is lower in saturated fat overall. So it would probably be the better choice, but more than anything, it's just a matter of just being able to understand the labels when they come. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Thank you.
To clarify, you're not endorsing any of them. You're just trying to help us read labels.
Right.
Yes. So yeah. So I'm not being paid by Flora Proactive or Clover.
We needed to check that.
Yeah, definitely not.
Thank you.
Yes, because then I was beginning to think and I was wondering, okay, how about someone who is underweight versus someone who is trying to lose weight?
Yeah.
They go for, when they have to make the choice.
Yes. So my advice is always go for unsaturated fats where possible, to try to, sort of, if you're underweight and you're trying to get a bit more fat in your diet, unsaturated fats is the way to go because it's not going to have, ramifications for your LDL cholesterol and cholesterol levels.
And Alistair, about that too, am I also right in saying that like all products have both unsaturated and saturated fats? So when you say go for unsaturated, you're referring to those products that have more unsaturated fats, like what you've just shown here, because all products would have both, right?
Indeed. So where that blend of unsaturated fats is a lot higher, then that's what you're going for, definitely. But that being said as well, if we're thinking about things like cooking oils, if I was to put cooking oils on either side, you would see that cooking oils, like rapeseed oil has a really high it's all unsaturated fat basically. And, it's, sort of better to cook with that sort of rapeseed oil than it would be to cook with a block of butter or a block of Flora Proactive or a block of Clover, if that makes sense.
Yes, please, I'd like to ask again. I think that in addition to helping us read the labels, you could help us to also make a choice. Because like Hiba said, I wish that you had blinded us to the names of the spreads, so that you could go out, and tell us that, okay, so this, we have a combination of both. And so when you have this kind of proportion versus that, even though saturated is higher, or even though unsaturated is higher, you could go in for this or that. But now I am not really sure. I understand how to read the label, but if I have to pick, for me, like I would have gone for Flora. Because even though Clover has a higher amount of unsaturated fats, I still see that it's higher for saturated compared to Flora. So, like, you know, for a confused person, what do you do? You know?
Well, the thing is, you answered the question. You answered the question. So you were taking a look at the overall fat sort of composition, and you rightly read that there is a lot of saturated fat in that other spread. You know, so that sort of Clover spread to the one side, as opposed to the Flora proactive, which is overall, you know, is actually lower in overall fat. So just in terms of the label, it's just a matter of taking a look at the total fat, and then taking a look at, you know, the amounts of saturated and unsaturated. And then when you see that the blend is slightly higher in unsaturated, then, you know, then you can feel more confident knowing that you're not picking a purely saturated fat spread, you know, or you're not picking a pure butter, let's just say. But that being said as well, I must put a disclaimer that, you know, I have nothing against butter. And it's not that butter is unhealthy. We're speaking about cholesterol and how foods can affect cholesterol. We know that saturated fat, so if your diet is really, really, really high in pure saturated fat, so like pure butter, that is going to affect your cholesterol levels. You know, so there's just that. And then on the other side of things as well, just to confuse things even more, all fat is fat. So if you have a high fat diet, regardless of what fat you have, it is gonna cause excess weight gain, which can make it more difficult to manage cholesterol levels, manage your body's ability to manage certain food groups and things like that as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because sometimes people might think that, okay, this is a healthy fat, and so then they might try to take it in excess. So your point is that fat is fat. I mean, even though you've made this distinction, once it's fat, we just have to be careful not to take it in excess, right?
Indeed. And later on in the presentation, we'll actually be looking at portion sizes, so that everyone is completely clear on what sort of portion sizes they're looking at. So so I brought you back to the sort of common foods comparison page. So, you know, this is the African edition at the moment. So, you know, what they've put here is let me change this pointer to maybe laser pointer. There we go. So what we've got here, we've got that's the saturated fat section here, and then these are the unsaturated. This is unsaturated fats here. And then we have this other scary area here, which is the trans fatty acids. So we'll be speaking about trans fats in a second. But in short, trans fats are they are basically a type of unsaturated fat that behaves like saturated fat and actually actively increases cholesterol levels. So it can be very, very, very dangerous, in fact, to heart health. So dangerous that there are certain trans fats that used to be on the market, but then, you know, were completely taken off market. So it's going to be very difficult to find them in the market. So these trans fats were used in things like, you know, sort of takeaway places where they were, you know, sort of frying foods. They were, you know, sort of frying yam chips and other things like that in these trans fatty acids, which were, you know, very, very, very tasty, but were really, really, really negative to heart health. So you're not going to see a lot of those. And interestingly, you know, in common African diet foods, there is a really low amount of trans fatty acids. So, you know, really, 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 really low amount, almost negligible. So not really a lot to worry about there. Whereas you have some other foods, you know, where, as you can see, there are varying amounts of saturated fat. So one of the highest amounts, so this is all per 100 grams. So, you know, so that it's all on sort of a representative scale. So some of the highest amounts were in things like plantain chips, you know, that were, you know, sort of ripe plantain chips. If you were to eat 100 grams of them, you'd be having about 10 grams of saturated fat, which is the equivalent of having you know, like a whole tablespoon of butter, basically, you know, sort of just in your stomach. So there's that. You know, some other sort of notable entries were things like, okay, so yeah, we've got sort of egusi stew there, you know, or egusi soup, you know, we've got, it's more than 5 grams of saturated fat per 100 grams, you know, so just being aware of that. So this isn't me saying, oh my God, never eat egusi stew again, never eat plantain chips again. It's basically me saying those foods are known to have quite a bit of saturated fat, so eat sparingly. If egusi stew is your everyday, maybe it's not going to help you as much as actually having a little more jollof rice, you know, sort of spread throughout the day. So if I was to move on to Caribbean foods, so we've got a very sort of similar thing going on there, where actually a lot of Caribbean foods were, you know, sort of fairly low in saturated fat overall, and we're getting quite a bit more monounsaturated fatty acids there. And then we're getting quite a few more polyunsaturated fatty acids. So without polyunsaturated fatty acids, you know, those are those fatty acids that are useful for the heart, useful for heart health and things like that. And once again, on a sort of Caribbean food spread, you know, you're getting a diet that's really low in trans fatty acids. So what I'm really trying to say here is that, you know, one of the things the African and Caribbean diet, you know, is ostracized for is how unhealthy it appears because of the way things are cooked and done. But you know what the data was showing us based on, you know, this assortment of foods here is that actually the foods are not as bad as the media may have portrayed. In fact, the diet seems to be fairly low in saturated fat and quite high in unsaturated fats. So just throwing out to the crowd, like, you know, was that a surprise to anyone? Was that right on cue with what you already believe? Is this something you're happy to see or something you're unhappy to see? Okay, but what about you? What about you? This is something you probably already know, you know.
The fact that the values are not so high, it's not so bad that it's made to put to it. So I have my reservations because, well, I don't know how this was analyzed, but sometimes I think it also depends on how people do their cooking. And, you know,
I was waiting for you to bring that.
I had.
Yes. That's why I asked you. I was waiting for you to bring that.
You're waiting for me to bring it up, yeah.
Because the biggest caveat with this particular piece of research, and they put it as a disclaimer in the research that they did in Leeds Beckett. They said that this was based on, you know, I think 10 or 15 variations of these particular dishes over 10 to 15 different homes. And there was quite a bit of variance in some of the foods, you know. So depending on, you know, what your mother or what your father taught you about how to cook these particular foods is the kind of impact it's going to have on, you know, on the fatty acid profile. That makes sense to everyone.
And Alistair, let me just share this example. I visited someone once, and they were frying 2 eggs for me, and I'm not exaggerating. The oil in the pan for the 2 eggs were like 4 tablespoons. So this is how they fry their egg. They fry it and then they pour the oil away. I had never seen anything like that before, but that's how they fry their eggs, like about 4 tablespoons, and then they fried the egg and then they had to pour the rest of the oil away.
Wow.
So
wow.
Yeah, it depends on how the food is cooked.
Wow. Well, it's good that you were a very, very polite guest. You know, you ate the buttered eggs. You know,
I did. It was just a day, so I didn't think it would do.
Oh, good. But yes, cooking methods can really have an impact on how healthy our food really is. So which actually brings me to my next point, which is power in plants. So we know that plant-based proteins and sort of plant-based fats as well are typically lower in fat and saturated fat than animal-based foods. So green leafy vegetables and, certain plant sources actually contain omega-3. So there are some people who, I speak to in clinic who are actually vegetarian or vegan, and, they may have a slightly raised cholesterol, and they're saying, well, I can't eat sardines, to help to adjust my fat composition or fat levels or blood fat levels. So I'm stuck. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm not going to be able to eat certain foods. So there are options, on God's green earth. We have things like flax seeds, walnuts, seaweed, interestingly. Edamame or soya beans, kidney beans, and chia seeds, which actually contain really good amounts of omega-3. So you can base your diet around, especially things like soya beans and kidney beans, which are really, really high in protein as well. Base your diet around things like that to help to actively bring that omega-3 into the diet. And as we know with, plant-based foods, they can be more ecologically sound because they take less resources to produce and contribute less to greenhouse gas emissions than animal production. So, for people who are really, really sort of eco-focused, plant-based nutrition can be really, really useful for that. And, it's a good prompt then to have some more meat-free meals. I know that in the African and Caribbean diet, actually, there are a lot of foods that are eaten that could be meat-free. So I come from a Ghanaian West African background. I'm thinking about one of my favorite meals on the planet, which is red on red, which is, basically like is like a black-eyed beans cooked in a really, really, really nice tomato stew. Sometimes meat can be added to it for flavor, but I know it could be made with just the beans, and seasoned in a particular way so that you're getting more of that plant-based nutrition without adding saturated fat from meat, so it's something that could be done. And, for other people, it could be having a 50-50 meal where basically if you've got like, like a meaty dish there, you could substitute half of that meat for, some nice plant-based protein, so that you're still getting some of the meat there, but you're not getting as much, therefore cutting the saturated fat coming from meat in half, which can be really, really, really useful. So I've put up some, some interesting examples like chili con carne, chicken and chickpea curry, beef and lentil casseroles, and things like that. Alcohol is something that we don't speak about enough in our communities. Alcohol, we know, high alcohol intake can lead to raised cholesterol too, just because of the way alcohol is metabolized in the body. So as we know, there's actually health risk with any intake of alcohol. So I'm sorry to be a killjoy, everybody, but we know that alcohol is drunk not just as a nutritional beverage, but actually as an enjoyment beverage. So if drinking, aiming not to drink more than 14 units a week, and spreading your intake over at least 3 days, and taking a good number of alcohol-free days a week. So no binge drinking more than 6 units at a time. What does a unit look like? We've got a pint of beer, sort of being a unit. We've got 175 mils of wine in a unit there, and 50 mils of spirit. Oh, sorry. So all these are sort of 2 units. My bad. So a pint of beer, 175 mils of wine, which is like a medium pub or bar or club measure, or 50 mils of spirit. So these are for all 2 units each. All right. Okay, cultural cooking methods that could be making it all worse. So, Hiba brought up a really, really, really good example of someone who was, frying their eggs in 4 tablespoons of butter, and actually having to drain the oil or drain the butter off before even serving her the eggs. Thinking about like how much fat is added to foods in the first place, is it thinking, is it necessary for the taste? Is it necessary for health? But actually the focus I'm trying to bring here is on deep frying and reusing oil. So we already know that when you deep fry, you're adding hundreds and hundreds of extra calories to a particular food. But on the other side of things, we're looking at reusing oil. So yeah, we haven't got many people in the crowd, but I was going to do like a sort of show of hands for people who have, anyone who's ever reused oil in the past, you know. So I'm going to raise my hand because I remember sort of in my younger years, you know, sort of, yeah, it's like
you get lots of us.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm getting a lot of raised hands. Good. But yeah, we have all done it. So I can say that I've done it before. And the dangerous thing about reusing oil is that if you've got a very healthy oil, like rapeseed oil, you know, that is quite high in omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, when you reuse that oil, once it's cooked and reused, the structure chemically changes and it turns into a trans fat, just like that. And I'm sure all of you remember what I was saying about trans fats before. It's the fact that obviously trans fats actively behave like saturated fats and increase LDL levels. And, you know, we know that it can lead to excess weight gain. It can lead to an increase in your blood fat levels or triglyceride levels, which is also a modifiable risk for cancer, heart disease, and even pancreatitis. Wow. So just being really careful about reusing oil, you know, once you've, you know, so, you know, deep frying is not something that should be done as part of your everyday sort of diet, because you're more likely to reuse oil at that stage. And then also, you know, if you are sort of frying and things like that, get rid of the oil that you've used. Once you've used it, you have used it, to dispose of it responsibly.
Can you clarify what you mean by reuse? Because many people will not really understand what you mean by reuse. Is it oil that is left overnight, or if I fry something to now and maybe I'm receiving visitors, I've just fried something now, and then after maybe an hour or two, new visitors come and I want to fry again, is that reused?
Yeah, so that would be reusing. That would be reusing. So that's a really good point that you've raised. So what is reusing? So, you know, once that oil has been heated up, been allowed to cool, you know, even if it's for an hour or so, the chemical structure of that oil that's in that pan has changed now. So just being aware of that. Or does that answer your question there, Dr. Farrell?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So I've spoken a lot about foods that can actively increase cholesterol. So now we're going to speak about foods that can actively reduce cholesterol, because I'm aware that time is catching me. So yes, we know that the disclaimer is that good portion control, regular consumption, and broad intake will make sure that you have the maximum efficacy of a cholesterol lowering diet. So, you know, I've got things like oily fish in there because they contain omega-3s. We've got green leafy vegetables, so they contain omega-3 and 6. Fruit skins and pulp, so the pulp in oranges, the skin of apples, skin of pears, skin of berries, they contain pectins, which actively lower cholesterol. So it's very good to be getting berries, apples, oranges into your diet. Porridge oats are really effective in cholesterol lowering because they contain beta glucan. Beta glucan is like a chemical net, you know, that sits in your gut, and it catches cholesterol to stop it being absorbed by your body. So porridge oats in the morning in a nice small controlled portion fashion can actively help to reduce cholesterol. Whole grains can have a bit of this effect as well. However, they do not contain beta glucan. Porridge oats seem to be the main determinant. You know, they seem to have that. Flax seeds and soya products also contain omega-3s, which can help to reduce your overall sort of cholesterol. Vegetable oils like your olive oil, rapeseed oil, linseed oil, hemp oil, So all those plant-based oils, they contain quite a bit of omega-3. And then I've got sort of walnuts and chia seeds at the bottom. So as you can see, you can really, if you can insert these things into your diet in several ways to boost that, dietary power when it comes to reducing cholesterol from your diet. So what are the practices that actively reduce cholesterol? Portion size control as as the top bracket. So when we're looking at portion size control, I go back to Dr. Hibber's example of a friend who was cooking with 4 tablespoons. So 2 eggs, 4 tablespoons of butter. According to the British Heart Foundation, a good portion size of fat would be using a low-fat spread, 2 teaspoons, to create a whole meal, basically. So, if you're, I know a lot of people will usually panic when they think to themselves, wow, how am I going to use 2 teaspoons of a sort of a low-fat sort of spread or oil to cook a whole dish for friends and family? Well, there are ways that we can adjust sort of our cooking methods, such as dry frying certain things, steaming, boiling, to take advantage of things being, changed by heat without adding fat in order to, in order to cook those foods. So that way the calories are lower, the fat content is lower. When it comes to oily fish, once again, we're looking at oily fish being able to fit in your palm. So if everyone raised their palm, that slice of salmon or a slice of sardine or slice of pilchards, is really sort of supposed to fit in your palm. And with any meat that you have, that's kind of the portion size that you're aiming for. So what would that look like in practical measures? That's basically, that would be, let's just say 3/4 of a chicken breast. That would be 1 to 2 chicken thighs, perhaps, so looking at that sort of portion size. And obviously when doing that, your plate will look smaller. That's why we fill empty plates with seasoned, steamed, grilled, or dry fried vegetables. And you can have as much of that as you like, because it's not going to affect your blood sugar levels. It's not going to, have a drastic impact on cholesterol levels. In fact, it may even help to lower cholesterol in some respect. And it's going to keep you full, and it's going to keep you satisfied and keep cravings away. And it just means that you can have more of a balanced plate with more vitamins and minerals. More practices: reducing fat used in cooking by measuring it out. If there is high saturated fat content, try substituting some of that fat with unsaturated fat. So instead of frying eggs in butter, why not try some rapeseed oil? Things like that. If there's meat in the sauce, try using a plant-based protein like beans. So I've brought my red back again. That's my favorite dish. Once again, it could be made with just black eye beans. Maybe I might even be able to add some chickpea. Who knows? Just to add some combos that are really, really going to boost life. And when you're looking at your dish, think to yourself, could I add vegetables? And if so, what can I add? Let that be one of the first thoughts that comes to mind. And, if you want to keep your cultural dish as it is, think about whether it's a high fat dish, and think about maybe having it less often in your weekly cycle if you want to be able to enjoy it and have it in that sort of portion controlled fashion. So in summary, aim to include 2 portions of oily fish in your diet a week, aiming for 140 grams per portion. So that 140 grams is basically the size of your palm. Increase whole grain fiber intake. So adding flax seeds to porridge or Weetabix can increase the omega-3 fatty acids. And because you're adding it to porridge, you've got that cholesterol lowering property in there already. Aiming for 2 meat-free days a week, so that you can get a little bit of a break from, sort of fats in your diet. Cooking where possible to control how much and what fats you use. And lastly, adding more green leafy vegetables to meals. So seasoned spinach on the side, it doesn't have to go in the dish, it can be on the side to bulk up that plate for you. I've attached some references for some really, really, really good studies that I used to influence my talk today. I'm aware that I've been talking a lot, so I would love to hear people's questions.
Wow. Wow. Yes, you've gone over the time, but we don't have Orlando today. So I sent a message to Elizabeth and Shekinah to ask for some few minutes. Alistair, thank you so much for that fascinating talk. Very insightful. I can listen to you the whole evening, you know. It's such a delight to listen to you talk. I had a few questions in the chat box, so I'm just going to read this. There's one from Sarah. Sarah says, I have type 2 diabetes, was put on cholesterol meds. It's now normalized due to the intervention that we did. However, I was told to continue taking them till I lose more weight. So far, I've lost 13 kg. Do you have a comment on that?
So with the cholesterol lowering medication, it would be statins. Because of the NICE guidance, so that's basically the guidance that we use nationally to influence how we take care of people. They have made it part of treatment for diabetes in the future. Anyone who's had diabetes for more than 10 years, should be offered a statin and should ideally continue on it, just because statins work so powerfully in keeping your cholesterol levels down. Just because, especially in the African and Caribbean communities, we have genetics that actually influence the way we digest and deal with fats. So, by having that statin there, it's basically helping to keep your cholesterol down, because it's not always weight that pushes up cholesterol. Sometimes it's genetics that's doing that as well. Sometimes it's combinations of food. And thinking about, especially in type 2 diabetes, thinking about long-term health, cholesterol is just 1/3 of the picture. You've got blood sugars, you've got blood pressure as well. What the statins is doing is making sure your body doesn't overproduce cholesterol, so that cholesterol doesn't leak out of your blood vessels and instigate a heart attack or a stroke. So I know I sound like an advocate for medication, but it's just because I've seen how it works and how it's prevented or lowered people's risk from 65% of having a heart attack to less than 5% just through 5 years of continued use. But similarly, it is always your choice as well. So if you've got a medication you are not comfortable with, and maybe you're not agreeing with, you can speak to your health professionals about it, and you can come up and try other things that work for you. And we as health professionals have to support you in being able to do that. So people ask me all the time, and I say, well, I'm not 100% in agreement, but we can work this out together. That's why they pay me in the NHS to do that. So yeah.
And about that, that's why CAHN has this Saturday session. So the consultants are there on Saturday to give you a second opinion on any kind of treatment that you have that you are not happy about. So if you join the Saturday sessions, you can get the opportunity to ask for a second opinion from one of the consultants. Now, other questions. Someone told me omega-6 and 9 supplements are actually harmful. Mm-hmm. And then similarly, that vegetable and sunflower oil are not good because they are saturated fats.
You know what, Hiba, that is a good question. So whoever raised that is a really good question, because where I was taking a look at some of the data over this. Like I said, me and my wife, we had a debate. We had a debate about this, and there is some data that was suggesting that some omega-3 and 9 fats can be harmful and can actively lead to increase in cholesterol levels. But in those papers, those people were all taking supplements, so that they were taking sort of beyond the therapeutic dose of those particular fatty acids, and it was leading to a slight change in outcomes. But it's only a few papers that have done that, just a handful. Whereas the overwhelming evidence is that they either don't influence your cholesterol levels, or that they have a slight therapeutic effect. So when we think about other things that could be influencing that, we have to think about sort of your dietary environment, your nutritional environment, your cultural environment. Are you getting enough exercise? Do you smoke as well? Do you drink alcohol? All of those things will influence what's happening with your cholesterol levels. So definitely think of it as a whole picture. But definitely a good question. Definitely a good question, because there is a lot of debate about it.
Thank you. I'll just ask one more question, because 15 minutes over the time is unacceptable. We're only doing this because Orlando is not here today. So apologies, Elizabeth and Shekinah. I'll just take one more question and then we can draw the curtain. What is good to drink while trying to control your cholesterol?
Oh, water.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
You can't
water
go
for
wrong.
the win. You cannot go wrong.
Water, 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 and water again.
Hiba, I have a question.
Okay, Robert, go ahead.
So, I mean, your last slide, you talked about, aiming to include too oily fish, right? If I was a vegan and I come to you, what alternative advice would you give me?
So when it comes to vegans, they have access to things like soya beans, which have a really, really, really good amino acid and protein profile, great for muscle building and for satiety. You have red kidney beans available as well, which also contain quite a bit of omega-3s too. You've got porridge oats in the morning, which have cholesterol lowering properties. You've got plenty of green leafy vegetables to work from. So those are the main the main sort of things that I'd be working with. Sort of beans, pulses, lentils, legumes, cucumber, things like that. So a lot of the green leafy vegetables, are really, 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 really good in that respect. And if it's protein, then you're looking at beans specifically for protein.
Thank you, Alistair. Robert, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, there are people who have interest in plant-based diets and veganism, vegetarianism. We're going to organize a session in the future to talk about how to do this in a healthy way. I think we have to bring this to an end. I know people are enjoying the session, but we have to bring this to an end. Alistair is one of us now, so you'll be seeing him from time to time. Every month we'll have him here at least once. And so, Alistair, thank you so much for an insightful and very informative session. I had a few comments regarding that. Someone said, thanks, doctor, for simplifying it, because what we used to is don't eat that, it's bad for you. Yes, so someone is really recommending, complimenting your talk. There's another comment. Thank you for such an engaging presentation, Alistair. I agree with it. And we could see the passion in you, because you could have gone on and on and on, not wanting to.
I really could.
You were right when I spoke to you and you said you really liked the topic and you were happy to do it, and you delivered really well. Yeah, so until we come your way again, just one thing I wanted to mention, when you said there was evidence from systematic reviews to show that taking omega-3 tablets, had a bit of therapeutic effect, even then you did say that was based on their eating and dietary behaviors as well, so the people who were eating well. It just, I want to end the session by quoting this. Dr. Ojuan likes to say there's a lot, Alice is here, one of our dietitians, that when the diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. And when the diet is right, medicine is of no need. So even when evidence is not coming from us, that's what the research is saying. Even when people were taking the omega-3 supplements, their diet had to be right for it to work. And that's why we have these sessions every Tuesday to remind us that we need to make these changes to our diet, to our lifestyle, in order to prevent diseases, in order to better manage chronic diseases. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for contributing, for asking your questions, for engaging. I really enjoyed today's session, and we look forward to another insightful session next week. I'm going to confirm the topic tomorrow, so we'll send it around on social media once the speaker has confirmed it. Thank you so much. Apologies, Orlando is not coming, but I'm going to hand it over to Elizabeth to end. Thank you, Alistair. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hiba, and thank you for that, Alistair. Thank you so much for holding today's topic. We hope everyone's found today very useful, very engaging. Please do let us know in the chat box how you found this evening. We want to hear feedback from you. What would you like to see, some other topics in the future? What would you like to hear from us? We'd love to hear from your feedback. So please do engage in the chat box. Let us know your feedback. Where are you tuning in from? What did you find, or what have you learned from today's topic? Thank you so much for that. And then Alistair as well, if you can please send us a copy of the slides at health@CAHN.org.uk. I believe a few people also would like to have a look back on some of the facts that you mentioned there. So thank you so much again for those tuning in on Zoom, on Facebook, and on YouTube. We're really happy that everyone has tuned in this evening and really engaged with this evening's session. Unfortunately, there will be no physical activity session today, but it will be back again next week, Tuesday, and we will be followed. That will be a boxercise session as well, joined by Orlando, our physical instructor. So please do tune in. We are also back again on Saturday for our Cat Tip Health Hour. That's from 11 to 12:15. And this week we are focused on cholesterol and diabetes as well. So please do tune in to that topic. If you'd like to join and register for that as well, just simply email us at events@CAHN.org.uk. And if you have any questions throughout the week, or if you'd like someone to talk to, our helpline and counselling service is available, and my colleague will post those details in the chat box as well. So we look forward to seeing you all. We have different events and activities. We will be holding a suicide awareness training next week, Friday the 13th, from 9:30 to 2:30, and that will be on site at the Transformation Powerhouse Center. So my colleague will post the flyer in the chat box if you'd like to be a part of that, and we will be giving out certificates as well for this training. Please do register onto the program and be a part of that. Next month as well, our Windrush Celebration Day event is going to be held at Alexandra Park. So please do tune into that. There will be loads of different festivities and activities in line with the Windrush Celebration Day. My colleague will post the registration link as well. So please do register on for these events. But like I said, we look forward to seeing you all back again for Healthy Hearts and for Health Hour, and to really engage. Please do keep your feedback coming in. We do want to hear from you. How are you finding these sessions? What are some topics you'd love to see in future? And I believe Dr. Hiba will incorporate that in our program as well. Other than that, have a lovely evening, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at some of our future events. Bye for